Hi everyone, right, we're on to chapter 3, which is wonderfully called The Eye Gouger. Darkus struck with Virginia and Bertolt for the rest of the afternoon. At 3:30, when the school bell rang, they went their separate ways and Darkus returned to Uncle Max's place alone. Nelson Road was mostly residential. Tall terraced houses lined the street, grubby with exhaust fumes. The road was a busy thoroughfare for London buses taking people into town. The parade was halfway down and made up of 8 shops, 4 on each side of the road. The entrance to Uncle Max's flat was through a cherry-red door to the left of the health food shop, though through it was a flight of stairs which took you up to the flat's front door and a hallway out to the back garden which Uncle Max shared with the shop. Standing on the doorstep, Darkus pulled at a shoelace hanging around his neck and fingered the 2 keys Uncle Max had given him 10 days earlier, when he'd first arrived. Uncle Max didn't get back from work till 6, and his home wasn't kitted out for kids. He didn't even have a TV. The front room was crammed with books, mismatched furniture and strange objects Uncle Max had brought back from his travels. Darkus felt out of place when his uncle wasn't there, and it was in those moments that he missed his father most. He dropped the keys back inside his shirt. Instead of going inside, he crossed the road and sat down on a curb opposite, a little way from the bus stop and a bin. He looked at the shop next door to Mother Earth, which was boarded up. Half of a broken Emporium sign hung wonkily down over the wood-covered windows. Darkus guessed the shabby grey door between the 2 shops was like Uncle Max's door and led to the derelict-looking flat upstairs. Uncle Max had warned him to stay away from the men who lived there. They were cousins who'd inherited the building, he said, each planning to open a different type of shop downstairs, and because neither would give way, the Emporium had remained closed for 5 years. Darkus decided he'd go and sit in the laundrette opposite Mother Earth and read his Spider-Man comic until Uncle Max got home. Darkus liked the laundrette. People were always coming and going, and the heat from the dryers made it warm. As he stood up, a thin man in ill-fitting clothes came pelting out of the grey door, his eyes bulging out of their sunken sockets. His mouth was stretched wide, emitting a loud shriek and displaying a higgledy-piggledy collection of yellow teeth. Darkus heard a series of crashes coming from inside the Emporium, and a man the size of an ogre thundered out of the same door, sweating and roaring. Darkus shuffled backwards as the 2 men collided and began to grapple with each other. "You're the health hazard," the thin man screamed. "Nonsense! It's your rubbish in the backyard that's the health hazard. That's stock for my shop. It's rotting junk, Pickering. What about your room, Humphrey? It's infested with bugs and it stinks. People can probably smell it from out here." He raised his beak-like nose in the air. Yes, I can smell it now. Pooh." Darkus sniffed, smelling nothing but exhaust fumes and bin juice. Mr. Patel from the newsagents came to the door of his shop to see what the fuss was about and rolled his eyes when he saw Pickering and Humphrey fighting. An elderly couple paused to watch the 2 men and then crossed the road to avoid them. "I found beetles in my hair after being in your room for only 5 minutes, and the council know what a slob you are because I wrote to them and sent them those bugs as proof." Pickering let out a shriek of laughter. "You're the filthy one," Humphrey roared, his chins wobbling. "I've never found beetles in my hair." "You don't have hair." The veins on Pickering's forehead bulged purple. "You think you're so clever," Humphrey sneered at his cousin. "But the joke's on you, because I wrote to the council too, complaining about all that trash you've piled up in the yard." He made a satisfied gurgling sound. "I even sent photographs." "Idiot," Pickering snapped. "I'm an idiot." Humphrey's head bobbed from side to side in outrage. "Yes, look what you've done." Pickering threw his hands in the air. "You've got us evicted." "What I've done?" The big man bared his bottom teeth. "It's your obsessive litter collecting that's got us the eviction notice." "That's stock for my antique shop." Pickering pointed a wiry arm at the boarded-up shop. "It's the gargantuan mass of squalor up in your room that's caused this trouble." "Antique shop? I don't think so, rat-face. This shop will sell pies." Humphrey slammed his hand against the window board, making a loud noise. "It will sell antiques." Pickering pressed his body against the shop and stretched out his arms as if he was trying to hug it. "Pies!" Humphrey pulled at his waist. "Antiques!" Pickering clung on tight. "Pies, pies, pies. This shop will sell pies. Over my dead body, Humphrey. That, my dear Pickering, can be arranged." Pickering wriggled out of Humphrey's grasp and, dodging under his arms, ran into the road. His fat cousin came thundering after him. Darkus stumbled back from the curb as cars and buses screeched to a halt. "Pies!" Humphrey hollered. "Antiques!" Pickering screamed, spinning around and hurling himself at Humphrey. Grabbing his neck, he leapt up onto his back and pummeled his face with his knuckles. A thick-set teenager leant out of his pinstriped car and shouted for the men to get out of the road. Humphrey trumpeted like an elephant and shook his legs trying to break free from Pickering's grip. As he did so, a gigantic black beetle dropped out of his trouser leg and landed on the road, right side up. Darkus blinked and leant forward to get a better view. The beetle looked deadly, like a ninja warrior. A fierce tusk, sharp as a tiger's claws, stuck out of its head, flanked by two smaller horns on its thorax. He looked about. No one seemed to have noticed the incredible insect that was now crawling towards him. Mr. Patel was standing in his doorway with his arms crossed, scowling at Humphrey and Pickering. Angry drivers were blasting their car horns, and the customers in the laundrette had spilled onto the street to watch the wrestling men. But the beetle continued its advance towards him, slow and steady like a miniature tank. As it got closer, Darkus realised it was easily the size of a hamster. He wanted to get closer, but it was so alien-looking that he was a bit scared to approach it. He didn't know if it might bite or sting, and that horn looked sharp. Humphrey roared, and Darkus glanced up to see him grabbing hold of Pickering's ankles, rotating and spinning like an Olympic hammer thrower, faster and faster, until finally he'd let go of his cousin's feet, sending him flying into the windscreen of a parked car and setting off the alarm. Pickering's eyes were wide with shock as he slid down the bonnet and dropped onto the tarmac, smacking his head on the ground. Humphrey dusted off his hands and strode back into the Emporium flat, leaving his unconscious cousin in the road. The onlookers flocked to Pickering and began rolling him towards the gutter, out of the way of the traffic. Darkus looked down. The giant insect was sitting right at his feet, and before he could think about whether it was a good idea or not, he was reaching down to touch the tip of its horn. It was sharp. "Whoa, you're cool," he said, realising his heart was thumping in his chest. Mesmerised, Darkus watched the beetle scramble up from the road onto the pavement, its body glistening like wet oil. He found the way it crawled fascinating. He'd never thought about the way he walked upright on 2 legs, and he wondered what it would be like to have 6 legs and to move around so close to the ground. The beetle walked by, lifting a tripod of 3 legs at a time, the front and rear legs of one side of its body, together with the middle leg of the other. When the insect reached his shoe, it started climbing, heading for his ankle, as if it was trying to get up his trouser leg. "Hey, stop!" Darkus fell backwards, flicking out his boot and flinging the beetle away. It landed on the pavement and paused, like it was thinking. Darkus was astonished to see it lifting its hard outer wings and unfolding a second semi-transparent rust-coloured pair. It flew straight back to him. The giant beetle landed on his knee, clinging onto his trousers with its claws. Darkus yelped and shook his leg again, rolling backwards onto his elbows, but the beetle wouldn't let go. Beside the bin next to him was a cardboard box. Darkus grabbed it and, sitting up, knocked the beetle into the box with the back of his hand. Embarrassed, he looked around to see if anyone had seen him flailing on the floor, but everyone was crowded around the unconscious man on the other side of the road, discussing what they should do with him. Peering into the box, Darkus saw the beetle on its back legs, thrashing about frantically as it tried to get back on its feet. He immediately felt bad for hitting it. He reached in and flipped the poor creature the right way up. "I'm so sorry, I hope I didn't hurt you," Darkus said softly. "It's just you gave me a bit of a fright." The beetle scrambled into the corner of the box, pulling at the walls of the temporary prison with its front legs. "Calm down, little fella, I'm not going to hurt you." But the beetle kept tearing at the walls, so Darkus decided to set it free. Crouching down, he held the box on its side on the pavement. The beetle scurried out of the box, but instead of running away, it clambered onto Darkus's hand and stood still, looking up at him expectantly. It took a second for Darkus to realise he was okay with the beetle being on him. The gentle scratch of its claws against his skin was almost pleasant. What surprised him was the weight of the insect. He assumed it would be light, but it felt solid and reassuring, like a pebble. He carefully lifted his hand. "Hello there." Right, I'm going to do this one in 2 parts, guys, because the chapter's just annoyingly slightly longer than 14 minutes. So I'll see you in a minute.